Welcome to our online press conference. My name is Tom Pelton. I'm Director of Communications at the Environmental Integrity Project. We're a nonprofit organization that acts as America's environmental watchdog, holding polluters and governments accountable to protect public health and the environment. Today, we are having 7 speakers talking about a federal lawsuit we filed this morning challenging a new Louisiana law that suppresses free speech of community groups to talk about and advocate for cleanup of dangerous air pollution detected by community air monitoring. Our speakers will be from Public Citizen Litigation Group, the Descendants Project, Rise St. James, Louisiana, Claiborne Avenue Alliance Design Studio, and Micah 68 Mission, and a leading scientist at Johns Hopkins. The community groups I mentioned are plaintiffs in the lawsuit. After they speak, I will open up for questions from reporters. Journalists, if you have a question, we'd love to hear it. Put it in a note in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. So as we're going along and you have a question, go ahead and type your question into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And then at the end, I will call on you and unmute you. And then you need to unmute yourselves as well so you can ask your question. I notice we have a couple TV reporters with us. Welcome. For TV and photographers, if anyone wants an in-person interview or photo with good visuals, one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, Dr. Joy Banner of the Descendants Project, is available at 1 p.m. Central today for an in-person interview with good visuals and industrial background about 20 minutes west of New Orleans in Vacherie, Louisiana. Please see the press release for the address and talk to me afterwards if you would like to get in contact with Dr. Banner for that stand-up interview with good visuals. So today, our first speaker is going to be David Bookbinder, Director of Law and Policy at the Environmental Integrity Project. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, everyone. This lawsuit is about community air monitoring and Louisiana's attempt to suppress community groups from doing air monitoring. People monitor for the simple reason of they want to know if the air is safe. They want to know if it's safe for them to breathe, if it's safe for their children, for their families, for the communities. They want that information because they live there and they want to know that everyone is healthy and safe. If you go out and you see your neighbor and your neighbor has emphysema, you might want to warn them if your air monitoring has shown unhealthy levels of particulate matter in the air, you might want to say, Mr. Jones, perhaps today is not the best day for you to take that walk. And according to the state of Louisiana and the law that we're dealing with, that will cost you. That will cost you $32,500. And on top of that, LDEQ may slap you with an additional $1 million penalty because you knowingly and willfully gave that information, but you didn't use the precise mechanism, the precise equipment and analytical methods that Louisiana says you have to use. So this statute is designed to discourage citizens from monitoring the air in their neighborhoods, letting people know when it's safe and when it's not safe, when it meets air quality standards, when it doesn't meet air quality standards. And as a result, we are challenging this statute. One thing, the Louisiana statute mandates that you can't talk about this air quality unless you're using the equipment that they want you to use. Unfortunately, the equipment that they want you to use costs hundreds or even thousands of times more than perfectly good equipment that people can use to monitor the air in their communities. We know that this equipment is satisfactory because that equipment was provided in many instances. It was loaned by EPA to these groups, or EPA gave them money to purchase this low cost and effective equipment. There is no need for these groups to spend 60, 80, $100,000 on equipment when in fact there is equipment that for $200 or less will give you perfectly adequate results for you to be able to tell your community, your family, whether or not the air they're breathing is safe. And that's really what the statute does. Back to you, Tom.
All right, thank you. That was David Bookbinder, Director of Law and Policy at the Environmental Integrity Project. Next, we have Nandan Joshi, attorney for Public Citizen Litigation Group. Go ahead, Nandan.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Nandan Joshi. As mentioned, I'm an attorney with Public Citizen Litigation Group, and I'm going to briefly go over how the Community Air Monitoring Reliability Act restricts the free speech of Louisiana residents. Now, despite its name, CAMERA has nothing to do with making air monitors more reliable. It is about censoring Louisiana residents who want to talk to their neighbors about air quality in their communities, and preventing them from taking action to fight for air quality. So the first thing you should know about CAMERA is that it only applies to community groups. CAMERA does not prevent industry polluters or the state government from using air monitoring data to disseminate their message to the public. The second thing you should know about CAMERA is that the legislature wrote into the law that it wanted to police the accuracy of air monitoring information disseminated by community groups. This is a constitutional red flag. The First Amendment does not allow the government to silence voices that the government thinks are wrong. That is something that should be determined by the marketplace of ideas. And let's be clear, data from community air monitoring is not inaccurate. Congress and the EPA have endorsed and funded community air monitoring because they provide important information about air quality in areas of the country not served by expensive monitoring devices. So how does CAMERA silence community voices? First, CAMERA says that a community group that wants to use low-cost air sensors to monitor air quality cannot use the information it gets to allege that the clean air laws have been violated. It's perfectly fine for them to say that air quality is good, but if groups warn their neighbors that air quality is below regulatory standards, the state can impose civil penalties on their speech. CAMERA also makes it unlawful for community groups to do their own analysis of air monitoring data. It forces them to provide a, quote, quality assurance certification if they don't use a state-approved lab to analyze their data. And the law does not explain what this certification means, but if a community group disseminates its analysis without that certification, the state can seek civil penalties against the group for engaging in unlawful speech. In fact, CAMERA goes further. It prevents any release or communication of monitoring data unless the group calls what the law states is a, quote, clear explanation of data interpretation, appropriate context, and relevant uncertainties. That is not defined in the law. CAMERA makes speech illegal if groups release their air monitoring data without providing the state-mandated explanation. And even if groups try to comply with CAMERA, they still might be held liable if those explanations are not clear enough. These restrictions do not only apply when community groups want to talk to the public. These groups cannot talk to federal or state regulators or make allegations in court unless their speech conforms to CAMERA's requirements. The First Amendment's guarantee of free speech does not allow the government to impose liability based on the content of speech, but that is exactly what CAMERA does. Under CAMERA, the state of Louisiana will watch what community air monitoring groups say about air quality and how they say it. And if these groups say the wrong thing or say it in the wrong way, they could be held for thousands of dollars in civil penalties. It should come as no surprise that the effect of CAMERA will be to deter community groups from speaking out about air quality to avoid the risk of crippling penalties. And if groups cannot tell their story, they will be deterred from engaging in air monitoring in the first place. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, CAMERA puts no restrictions on industry speech. Polluters remain free to tell the public their stories without fear that the state will impose penalties on their speech. In that way, CAMERA not only regulates speech content, but discriminates based on the identity of the speaker. CAMERA will not make air monitoring information more accurate. Instead, it creates a classic censorship regime that will deprive the public of valuable information about air quality from groups that are working on behalf of the residents of Louisiana rather than their own financial self-interest. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Nandan Joshi, attorney with the Public Citizen Litigation Group. Next, we have Dr. Joy Banner, co-founder and co-director of the Descendants Project. Go ahead, Dr. Banner.
Hello, my name is Dr. Joy Banner, as she said, co-director and co-founder of the Descendants Project, and I am joining you from St. John, a Baptist parish in my community of Wallace. In my neighborhood, we sit directly across the Mississippi River from an aluminum smeltering plant. This plant releases volatile chemicals such as mercury, forever chemicals, in addition to the other chemicals and particulate matter that is present in the air. We're in the middle of Louisiana's Cancer Alley. We rely on air monitors to ensure that we have the adequate and quality data to protect our neighbors and our families from the pollutants and the health impact causing chemicals that are in the air. The Camera Act is not one that is the Camera Act is not one that is designed to help improve our health quality and standards. It is one to detract and to diminish our right to free speech. There are many people out there who think that we should not have air monitors. We should not have air monitors because we should not have to be the ones monitoring our air. My community is one of the most vulnerable. Our risk of cancer is higher than 95% of the rest of the country, but yet the burden of protecting our health, of protecting our air lies with us. But with that being said, we still rely, we need, and we appreciate the methods and the air monitors that have been approved by the EPA in many cases and also funded by grants from the EPA. There is no reason why our speech, our data should be questioned and diminished. Lastly, I would like to say that my community of Wallace is called a free community, is known as a free community. That's because my ancestors who were enslaved at the neighboring plantations, after fighting for their freedom in the Civil War, came back and established these free towns for them and for their descendants. It is ironic that in the year 2025, that those freedoms are being taken away from us. Again, we need our monitors. They are one of our best weapons, best protections against the polluted air that we are being forced to breathe on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Joy Banner, co-founder and co-director of the Descendants Project. Reporters, as we're going along here, if you have a question, as a reminder, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Look for a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to type in your questions to get them queued up. We'd love to have them at the end. Also, at 1 o'clock today, Dr. Joy Banner will be available for TV interviews out in the field with a good backdrop for a TV interview. If you're interested, give me a call afterwards. Next, we have Dr. Peter DiCarlo, Johns Hopkins University air pollution scientist and associate professor of environmental health and engineering. Go ahead, Dr. DiCarlo.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak on this panel today. I want to start this out by saying my remarks here are my own in my capacity as an air pollution scientist, and they're not made on behalf of Johns Hopkins University. That being said, I want to make three kind of key points today with respect to the discussion on community level air monitoring in Louisiana. The first being regulatory monitoring instrumentation is typically not even the best available technology for measuring air pollutants in the air. Number two, regulatory monitoring is not adequate to understand the cancer and non-cancer risks for communities in Louisiana based on the chemicals that they're breathing. And the third and final point I wish to make is that community needs should be met by the regulatory agencies. And when they are not, researchers such as myself and the communities should not be threatened for seeking to understand what is in the air that they breathe. So number one, regulatory monitors serve a purpose, and they've been approved for use in monitoring air pollution by regulatory agencies, but they are not the best available technology for measuring the chemicals that are in our air. The scientific research community has and continues to develop new instrumentation to measure more chemicals faster and with more accuracy than the regulatory instrumentation that is used by regulatory agencies. These advanced instruments are capable of making mobile measurements of air pollutants from a moving vehicle with faster than 1 second resolution and can map out where the highest pollutant concentrations are. My group and other researchers have and continue to do this so that we can identify cancer and non-cancer health risks for communities living near to industrial facilities. Which brings me to point two. In many cases, measurements of the most harmful species are not even being done. For chemicals which there are for chemicals which they are being done, they're not done frequently enough or do not have the appropriate spatial coverage to measure air pollutants at the community level. This is especially true for ethylene oxide in Louisiana. Regulatory ethylene oxide measurements in Cancer Alley were not available when we performed spatial measurements of this chemical in February of 2023. This, despite regulatory models of cancer risk for the river parishes showing it to be the air pollutant responsible for the largest overall cancer risk for communities in Cancer Alley. Our measurement data that we collected showed cancer risks that were 10 times higher than the models from regulatory agencies. And this really demonstrates the need for these important measurements, which again, are not being done. Simply put, regulatory measurements need to be done in a way that quantifies the risk to community health, which means better spatial coverage, more frequent measurements, and most importantly, measuring the chemicals that pose the highest health risks. Without this, there's a void in our understanding of community health risks from air pollution in places like Cancer Alley. And number three, this need really must be met, as Dr. Banner pointed out, by the state agencies that are charged with monitoring the environment and protecting the residents of Louisiana. But where there is a need, there's an opportunity, and community groups and air pollution researchers have stepped in to try to address that need. The state should be finding ways to meet that need, not passing legislation to penalize communities and researchers who are simply trying to understand how the air pollutants coming from industrial facilities are impacting the health and lives of communities in Louisiana. Thanks.
Thank you. That was Dr. Peter DiCarlo of Johns Hopkins University. Next, we have Kate Lyon Hunter, Director of Research and Policy at Rise St. James, Louisiana. Go ahead, Kate Lyon.
Good morning. I'm very glad to be here on behalf of Rise St. James, Louisiana. Rise St. James is a faith-based grassroots organization that is fighting for environmental justice as we work to defeat the proliferation of petrochemical industries. I'm also serving as local counsel on this case. I want to start out with just why community air monitoring is so needed in our fence-line communities all across the state. Many of these communities are historically and majority Black or Indigenous, and all predate the arrival of polluting industry. Many fence-line communities, including the 5th District of St. James Parish, rank in or over the 95th percentile nationwide for risk of developing cancer due to exposure to toxic air pollution. One of the carcinogens that causes the most cancer risk in Louisiana is ethylene oxide. Fence-line communities within a mile of ethylene oxide emitting plants have 24 times the national cancer risk. Dr. DiCarlo's study estimated that a great deal of health hazards in Cancer Alley are caused by ethylene oxide. However, statewide, LDEQ does not conduct any air monitoring for ethylene oxide. Despite 20 of the last 24 plants built in St. James Parish being sited in the majority Black 5th and 4th districts, LDEQ only installed an air monitor in the 5th district last year. Unfortunately, this monitor is temporary and is set to go offline next year. The one other monitor in St. James Parish measures just ozone. The one air monitor in Ascension Parish is located nearly 3 miles away from the largest polluters. In St. John Parish, the only LDEQ monitors there are for ozone and lead. It doesn't monitor for chloroprene, despite the census block surrounding the Danka DuPont chloroprene plant once having the highest risk of cancer in the country. The only monitor in St. Charles Parish measures sulfur dioxide, despite a huge tank farm that releases many harmful VOCs and other carcinogens. We have a huge problem here in Louisiana with inadequate monitoring for the type of heavy industry that we see here, partly because our legislature does not adequately fund our environmental department. This is why grant-funded monitors and academic studies like Dr. DiCarlo's are so important for us to get any information about hazardous chemicals in our air. The state doesn't monitor for many carcinogens, like I said, ethylene oxide or chloroprene, or doesn't monitor for them where it is needed most, and doesn't require polluting industry to conduct public monitoring either. In fact, Louisiana challenged the EPA HON rule, which would require polluting industry to conduct publicly available air monitoring for vinyl chloride, ethylene oxide, chloroprene, and other hazardous chemicals. It ends up being the burden of polluted communities to not only bear the effects of pollution, but to assume the duties of the state environmental agency by conducting community air monitoring. I challenged this law every step of the way as it made its way through the legislature last year, and I am beyond proud to stand with the incredible attorneys at EIP and Public Citizen as we mount today's challenge in federal court. To anyone else who has thought about standing up to bad laws, do it. Your voice has incredible power, as we see today. Camera was written and introduced by industry groups fearing what community air monitoring would reveal. Because there is no state monitoring for many of the most dangerous chemicals released, industry's numbers on emissions have been allowed to go on unchallenged. But now community groups have the power, the science, and the funding to prove what they have known and experienced for decades. The air pollution from petrochemical and other polluting industry is destroying their communities. We will not allow camera to silence the science.
Thanks so much. That was Kate Lyon-Hunter, Director of Research and Policy at RISE St. James, Louisiana. As a reminder, reporters, as you have questions, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Type your question into that Q&A. We'd love to get your questions at the end, so put them in there. Next, we have Amy Stelly, Executive Director of the Claiborne Avenue Alliance Design Studio. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. Simply put, camera is punitive. It is designed to publish organizations working for the good of the order in fence-line and marginalized communities. This law supports bad actors and encourages them to continue harming the good people of Louisiana. In addition to favoring industry over community, camera also prohibits the publication of air monitoring data from pollutants emitted by vehicles on urban highways. As a result, we have decided to remove the air quality data that we collected from our website. We began monitoring the air quality around I-10 in New Orleans because we know from our research that traffic-related pollutants can be as damaging to public health as pollutants from industrial facilities. So it's important to measure the chemicals on a regular basis. In a nutshell, the citizen science work of the Claiborne Avenue Alliance has served as a model for communities across the country. Our data illustrates the harm from air and noise pollution that communities gutted by urban highways face on a daily basis. The people of Louisiana have a right to know what's in their environment, and they have a right to demand remedies when they are injured. This law is oppressive and seeks to keep citizens in the dark. Thank you. You're muted, Tom.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. That was Amy Stelly. And now we have our final speaker, Cynthia Robertson, Executive Director of the MICA 6-8 mission. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. My name is Cynthia Robertson, and I serve as the Executive Director of MICA 6-8 Mission, a community-based organization in Southwest Louisiana committed to environmental justice, disaster resilience, and public health. I am proud to stand here today with the other community groups from across Louisiana who are fighting back against a law that was written to keep people in the dark, literally, about what's in the air we breathe. The so-called Community Air Monitoring Reliability Act, or CAMRA, is not about protecting public health or ensuring good science. It's about silencing communities like mine who have been using low-cost, reliable air monitors like purple air devices and an EPA-funded particulate matter and NOx sensor to uncover pollution that the state and industry have chosen not to report. We started our monitoring near the Westlake Chemical Complex in Sulphur after hearing from residents who live, work, and raise their children near the facility. Over 2/3 of the days we monitored showed particulate matter levels that the EPA considers unhealthy, especially for children, seniors, and people with asthma or heart disease. So what were we supposed to do? Ignore that? We shared those findings on Facebook to raise awareness. We did, but not now. Now, under camera, Simply posting that kind of data could cost us $32,500 per day, plus up to $1 million for so-called intentional violations. That's not just chilling, that's censorship, and it's dangerous. This is about more than data. It's about human lives. At our community event this past Sunday, I asked the 47 people in the room to raise their hands, and everybody did. Then I asked them to lower their hands if they or someone they love who lives in our region has cancer, then COPD, then heart disease, and finally asthma. And one by one, every single hand dropped. That image will stay with me forever. 47 hands raised in hope, and not a single hand left standing. That wouldn't happen in most places in this country. That level of illness wouldn't be accepted anywhere else without outrage and action. But here in Southwest Louisiana, it's our reality. And the state's response is to silence us instead of protecting us. People deserve to know if the very air surrounding their homes, schools, and churches is filled with benzene, ethylene oxide, or dangerous levels of fine particulate matter. The state should be thanking community groups for helping collect this data, not threatening us for doing their job. Camera isn't about science. It's about control. And it's about protecting polluters at the expense of the public. We're bringing this lawsuit because we all believe our communities have the right to gather, to share, and to act on the truth. We believe in science that serves the people, not just the industry. And we believe in the power of neighbors helping neighbors, because when government won't protect us, we must protect each other. The air in Louisiana should belong to the people of Louisiana, not just to the chemical plants that line our rivers, fence in our neighborhoods, and poison our futures. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Cynthia Robertson, Executive Director of the MICA 6-8 mission. Now we're going to open it up to questions from reporters. And reporters, we'd love to get your questions. Look on the bottom of your screen to the Q&A function and type in your question there. And then I will unmute you and you can ask your question. And let me just get our first question here. Joseph Winters, you have a question. I'm unmuting you. Joseph Winters from Grist, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm a reporter for Grist, and just before this webinar, I was reading some previous reporting about camera saying that it prohibits the use of community air monitoring data for regulatory or legal affairs. But the restrictions that you guys are describing sound much more extensive than that. So I'm curious if you can clarify, like, has the interpretation of the rule changed, or was that reporting like underselling what camera was actually trying to do?
Nandan Joshi, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, sure. Our interpretation is based on the plain text of the statute. I think perhaps I haven't seen that reporting, but I think they maybe were trying to undersell how extensive this statute, how extensively it regulates private speech about air quality and air monitoring. I'll read you the actual text of the statute, which says it's designed to establish standards for community air monitoring programs operated by entities to ensure that the data collected from such programs provides the public with access to accurate air quality information. So it is clearly geared at information going out to the public, and the actual provisions of the law are not restricted to regulatory proceedings. There are some provisions of the law that do apply in the context of regulatory proceedings that talk about what LDEQ can do, but the law itself, as a whole, is both in purpose and effect restricts private speech about air monitoring.
That's your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay, next we have a question from Hiroko Tabuchi, reporter at the New York Times. Hiroko, I'm unmuting you. Unmute yourself as well and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and thanks for this call and yeah, for taking this question. So I had seen that the Louisiana Chemical Association, which I understand was one of the backers of the bill, stated that the standards now required of community groups air monitoring were the same standards that industrial facilities were also required to meet with their own air monitoring standards. But I've also heard that that is not the case. Could you clarify what your understanding of that is?
David Bookbinder, do you want to try that question?
Sure. Yes, I'll take a shot at that one. Um, First of all, this statute does not apply to industry. So industry is free to use the same equipment that the community groups are using and then, just describe whatever the results are. So this law doesn't apply to them. It only applies to the community groups. If the Louisiana Chemical Association is referring to the equipment they have to use to monitor emissions from their facilities, yes, they're correct. It has to meet certain federal standards. But that is a completely different purpose than what community groups are monitoring for. If a industrial facility is emitting, chemicals from its smokestacks, it needs to have extremely accurate equipment to know exactly what is coming out of that. That's not the same as somebody in Louisiana, in a town in Louisiana, wants to test the quality of the air they're breathing. That's a completely separate issue. And as we've said, EPA and Congress have EPA not only funds groups to procure this equipment, EPA actually loans this equipment to community groups to do the sorts of monitoring they need to do for simple air quality in their homes and neighborhoods, which is a completely separate issue from measuring what comes out of an industrial smokestack.
Got it. Thanks.
Dr.
Yeah,
Go
makes
ahead.
sense.
Hiroko, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? You have another question?
Oh no, that makes sense. Thanks very much.
Dr. DeCardle, do you have any thoughts on contrasts or Nandan Joshi?
Yeah. I mean, all, following up what David just pointed out. I mean, an industrial facility that requires a permit has to follow appropriate steps to be allowed to emit those pollutants into the air and water in an area. And as such, as a for-profit entity, they're trying to make money by doing this. They should be required to use the best available measurements. And this is absolutely not the same thing for a community group seeking to understand what's in the air that they breathe and protect their health and their community's health. I also want to point out that when industrial accidents happen, all bets are off. The train derailment in East Palestine, non-regulatory approved measurements were used by contractors from Norfolk Southern to assess air quality and give information to residents during that whole incident. And so this is a situation that's outside of Louisiana where state or industrial entities use non-regulatory measurements to speak about air quality very openly and publicly. This was national news. And finally, just to kind of finish this thought off, I'm still not aware of facility level or state level publicly available measurement data on ethylene oxide in Louisiana, which again, in the river parishes, is the highest modeled cancer risk from regulatory models. And so until that sort of thing starts happening, people are in the dark.
Okay, thanks so much. Next question from Hallie Parker. I'm going to unmute you, Hallie, and remind us which news outlet you're with. Hallie Parker. You have to unmute yourself as well. Go ahead, Hallie. Oh, man, she might have a microphone issue. Hold on one second here. Hallie writes, has there been any enforcement of camera so far? Have there been any groups fined yet? David Bookbinder, any thoughts on that?
As far as we know, the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality which has the primary enforcement authority for camera, has not attempted to fine any community group for their monitoring.
Thanks for that. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, yes.
I'm with Verite News, and can I ask my second question, Tom?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. This one was for Peter, and you might have said it and I missed it, but I was just wondering if the monitoring that you conducted for your ethylene oxide study and the other studies that you worked on in Cancer Alley, if that would be considered invalid under this law.
I am not a lawyer, but my understanding in talking with lawyers and reading some of the language, it says the parameters, equipment, and analytical methods, along with modeling or mapping software utilized for analysis of the monitoring data, shall use the most current Environmental Protection Agency approved or promulgated emission test or monitoring method. So the technology that we used to measure ethylene oxide was brand new. It was actually funded for development by EPA using a Small Business Innovative Research grant, but it was not the most current Environmental Protection Agency approved or promulgated emission testing or monitoring method. It was brand new. And this is the way science and technology works, is we develop new methods for making these measurements. We see how well they work, and then they eventually get brought into regulatory approval if they meet certain standards. So this process requires the use of these measurements in places like Louisiana to make these measurements in order to see how well they perform. And the fact of the matter is they perform way better than the current regulatory approved methods by EPA. So my understanding in reading the language is that it wouldn't be allowed, but that's really just anti-science, anti-technology, anti-progress.
Dr. Banner?
Can I just also respond to the purpose of the law is not only to prosecute, to punish us for communicating the data from our air monitors, but it's also to send a chilling effect, right? So the groups of us, we have not been, while there might not be any of us that are punished, we are taking precautions. Like we have a program that we were about to launch to start reporting the data and communicating the data from our air monitors. We have put a pause on that. So I think the reason why we are not getting the enforcement in our part is because we as groups simply cannot afford, $30,000 plus fines, up to $1 million in order to report our data to keep our community safe. So in one respect, the law has been, and unfortunately, very effective in, again, scaring us away from being able to share the data with our community members who need it the most.
Thanks, Joy. I wanted to ask a third question in order to get to that. So thank you for just saying it.
Kate Lamb, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. The section that these enforcement mechanisms come from, these are largely designed for industrial fines for polluters, for companies that are intentionally putting things into the environment, whether that's dumping in the bayou or having an unapproved smokestack or a flare where they're burning things off. That's what these fines are designed for. They're not designed for community members or citizens. It's designed to punish industry for polluting, not community members for reporting.
Thanks so much. No enforcement at this time as of yet, but people are being changed in their behaviors. People are afraid to post their data, share their data to protect their neighbors. So it's having a huge impact already. Cynthia, do you have a question, a thought?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Joyce said. Here in Southwest Louisiana, we were posting our information on Facebook, and we were putting out flags in front of our office with the different colors of what the particulate matter was. And when we realized that we could be fined for that, we stopped doing it. So I don't think anybody has been fined because we're not doing it anymore because we can't afford to. So we have people who are, I have community members who say, why aren't you doing that anymore? Is it okay for me to go out and garden this morning? Because they were relying on that to inform them about the air quality so they would know how to go about their day. And one of the things is that there is an air monitor, an LDEQ air monitor in our area that is, our prevailing wind is from the southwest. This monitor is northeast of the plants that are blowing all this pollution on us. So it does absolutely nothing to protect us from or to give us information. And so the LDEQ puts up this wonderful thing saying your air quality is great today, when in actuality, it's only great if you're northeast of the metropolitan area of Lake Charles, Sulphur, Westlake, Mossville, this whole area. So it's very deceptive and leads to folks having problems with asthma and COPD on a regular basis.
Thanks so much. Our next question is from Virginia Gewin. Virginia, I'm going to unmute you and also unmute yourself and tell us what media outlet you're with.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm freelance. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
I'm just curious if Dr. DiCarlo's research has been curtailed by this law.
Dr. DiCarlo?
I think the easiest response is just we are continuing to and plan to keep on making measurements in Louisiana. Ideally, I think, as I mentioned, this really should be done by regulatory agencies, but until that need is met, we will keep doing the work that we're doing.
Our next question, Amy Stelly, go ahead. You have a thought?
Yes, I wanted to add that, excuse me, our research is continuing, but we're just not publishing out of fear of being fined, and we definitely can't afford $32,500 a day plus the 1 million, which I'm sure, considering how Louisiana operates, that we would get slapped, and many of us would get slapped with the willful and accused of willfully publishing bad data. So the research continues, but we can't share it.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, next is Corbin Ross. Corbin, I'm going to unmute you and unmute yourself and tell us what media outlet you're with. Corbin? Unmute yourself. Corbin writes, where does the law lay out the fines it will place on violators of the law? I don't know if either David or Nandan can specify, where does the law specify the fines for violations?
Yeah, the fines, so the law was codified in and I don't have the citations right in front of me, but in the section of the Louisiana statutes that deal with air quality. Before this law was enacted, the other provisions of that statute regulated polluters, industries that emitted air pollution, and had a enforcement mechanism for fining polluters that violate air quality standards. This statute, which now regulates air monitoring groups, was placed in that section of the statute, and so those fines that had been used to enforce air quality standards can now be used to enforce camera.
Okay.
Nandan, I can give the citation. The penalty provision is Louisiana Revised Statutes, Section 30:2025.
Okay. Any final questions from reporters? If you have any final questions, put them in the Q&A there. While you're thinking of any final questions, I'm just going to repeat that if anyone needs a stand-up interview for television or for radio, Dr. Joy Banner is available at 1 o'clock today at a location with good visuals. Go ahead, Dr. Banner.
Hi, yes. Just lastly, I just wanted, to emphasize, especially, in respect to the Descendants Project, Amy and Cynthia that's on here in reference to our work that we are doing. We are still doing the work, and that work is not easy. It's not a science project, right? It takes resources. It takes time. It's quality data. It takes training. We get trained to be able to monitor the equipment, to be able to participate. right? And so now we are doing all of the work, and then now we're not able to share those results. So again, this is very, resource consuming for the most impacted and vulnerable communities that are here on the front line and on the fence line of some of the most, again, dangerous, carcinogenic, harmful pollutants in the entire world.
And a violation of free speech rights. Americans have the right to talk about health threats
Absolutely.
in their neighborhoods. And to not allow that free speech is unconstitutional. Any final questions or thoughts? I think we have all of our questions. Okay. Well, if anyone needs more information or more interviews, or like I said, an in-person interview for TV or photos, you can reach me, Tom Pelton, at 443-510-2574 anytime, or email me at tpelton@environmentalintegrity.org. You can find a copy of the lawsuit on our website, www.environmentalintegrity.org. Thank you to everyone. Go ahead, David.
Looks like there's an additional question in the
Okay.
Q&A.
Excellent. Let's see. The final question. Hallie Parker. Okay. Hallie Parker, let me just unmute you, Hallie. 1 second here. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay, you could have read it. It's fine either way. But anyway, I was just wondering because the EPA, gave a lot of funding toward community air monitoring over the past couple years. Is it y'all's understanding that the data collected by under those federally approved community air monitoring projects, those wouldn't be accepted and would also be punishable under this Louisiana law?
The law express. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The law expressly applies to community air monitoring that uses both public funds and private funds, and it defines public funds to include federal funds. So, and there's no exception in the law for EPA air monitoring conducted pursuant to EPA grants.
Thank you.
Okay. Any final questions? All right. Well, if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to call me, 443-510-2574. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to help us with our press conference today. We're going to put a video recording of this press conference on our website. And thanks to everyone, and have a great afternoon.